Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire.
We've been talking about the evidence against Trump, but there's also evidence against Rudy Giuliani, a case that's getting hotter. Take a look at the scene outside the federal court in Manhattan. Two indicted Ukrainian-linked Giuliani associates were there today, one tying the case back to Trump, with a lawyer who said that some of the evidence gathered might be covered by executive privilege, which implies there's an executive involved, putting more pressure on that executive's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani. The diplomat for Ukraine, meanwhile, testified that Giuliani was driving the entire quid pro quo bribery plot. And there's new reporting that reveals the investigation into Giuliani's associates is widening, while Trump has continued to distance himself with echoes of what he did to another lawyer, Michael Cohen.
I don't know them. I don't know about them. I don't know what they do. But I don't know. Maybe they were clients of Rudy. You'd have to ask Rudy. I just don't know. You have to ask Michael. Michael's my attorney, and you'll have to ask Michael.
Well, we'll have to ask Nick and Shelby, prosecutor at Wall Street Journal, friends of the beat. Where do we go from here?
Well, I think where we're going to go is we're going to see these people being squeezed to cooperate in this case. Both of those people who are Giuliani associates, I mean, their only way of avoiding a major jail sentence here is to cooperate with the government. And that means, you know, who do they have to sing about? There's only one person that's really of interest to the prosecutors here, and that would be Rudy Giuliani.
When you look at the things we're now learning about this probe, and I sometimes I'm a broken record, but if there wasn't a red-hot impeachment probe into the president, this stuff would be huge. It would be the top story. Multiple premises searched. We've learned about this Giuliani probe. Dozens of separate telephone numbers. 50 bank accounts subpoenaed. What does that tell you?
Well, I mean, it tells me that, first of all, we know that both of these guys were involved in some way in this whole business with Ukraine. I mean, they're both from Ukraine. They both talked to people and introduced Rudy to people that were involved in his so-called investigation relating to the Bidens and what happened in terms of the Ukrainian involvement, so-called involvement in the 2016 election, which is non-existent. I mean, both of these people know something about that. What you have here is a major conspiracy, with the top kahuna here being none other than Donald Trump. All of these people, everything they're doing, they're acting in some way as agents for Donald Trump. All of this would be admissible in a major conspiracy trial because each one of these people in some way is a conspirator in the ultimate goal of this bribery case that you so eloquently laid out. So it seems to me that what they're going to do...
Was I eloquent or was Rick Ross eloquent?
I thought you were extremely eloquent, including your article in the Washington Post that laid out this same...
Well, wow, he's a close reader. But it is interesting, and I want to bring Shelby in on both those points. One, what you've been finding on the Giuliani front with your reporting, and then two, what both of you think about that, as promised, the bribery piece of this in Washington. But starting with Rudy.
Well, with respect to Rudy, we just published a story about Lev Parnas's activities. We reviewed some of the photos on his private Instagram account. And it shows, when you look at these photos, that he spent a lot of time with Rudy Giuliani leading up to the midterms and after the midterms. And this included flights on private jets, traveling across the country, going to different political events, going to baseball games, smoking cigars in Warsaw. I could go on and on. But what's interesting is that while they are spending so much time together, Parnas and Fruman are also allegedly funneling Russian money into U.S. campaigns, making illegal campaign contributions, and setting up these meetings for Giuliani with Ukrainian officials and former officials to try to help him get these investigations into Burisma and 2016 Russia probe started.
And based on what you're finding, I mean, the photos and the reporting you're doing suggests that Giuliani making an out-of-the-loop defense might be more difficult.
It'd be difficult. I also think when you look at the evidence, including phone records and possible monitoring of these men, that may be a problem for Giuliani based on how much time they spent together. But I also want to go back to that soundbite you played of President Trump. He said, I don't know these guys. I don't know what they do. You'll have to ask Rudy. There are numerous photos of these men with President Trump dating all the way back to 2015. So the claim of executive privilege, the fact that the lawyer even brought that up today, makes it pretty clear that they think President Trump does know these men and may have some sort of defense to shield evidence. But President Trump going out and saying that he doesn't know them is not going to help that case.
Yeah, and so on the bribery front and the evidence against Trump, I want to play for you a little more of what we played and what some viewers saw, which is David Kelly holds that same job that Giuliani had, that these other top officials had, and he went farther than usual on this very program. Take a look.
Given the evidence, lots of cases don't go to trial in a criminal case because the evidence is overwhelming or sufficient enough to have a conviction. So I doubt that this is a case that would really go to trial. When confronted with all the evidence, a reasonable defendant would likely take a plea.
You're saying someone presented with this evidence, like
it's pretty damning evidence.
Damning slam dunk evidence.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. But don't forget, we're not in a criminal trial. This is an impeachment process. And it's as a result, it's also a political process, which means that it's incumbent upon the House to bring the public up to speed on what this evidence is. I mean, it is really important that after they do all of these depositions, that they put together a very powerful presentation of all of these different witnesses live on television so they can put this all together. It is so important to get the public involved in this because the key here is putting together a solid case. I mean, it's pretty good right now from what we can see, but this case is not just about one phone call. It's about...
Why don't they talk more about bribery in your view?
Oh, I think they will.
You think they will, but they haven't.
They haven't, but there's no reason why they won't. I mean, the evidence is coming out that way. At least what we got from Taylor yesterday, even that transcript that we got pretty much shows that what we have here is classic bribery. I mean, that's how the mob bosses, carry out bribery. You don't come over and say, oh, I'm going to give you a bribe. I mean, you do exactly what Trump did on that particular conversation. But when you've got other people filling in the blanks now, like Taylor, which clearly show this is a bribe, and when you go back prior to April, before the first phone call and what else they were doing in the Ukraine, I think you're going to find that the evidence here is going to be overwhelming, but that's what they need.
That's why these two men could be very important, Parnas and Fruman. They spent a lot of time with Giuliani, and they also accompanied him to these meetings with former and then current Ukrainian officials. So they likely know what was said in these meetings and what the message was that Giuliani was sending.
It is Thursday, the 24th of October of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Well, I guess we're building a giant rock wall in Colorado. I'm pretty sure it's called the Rockies. It's big and beautiful. And you know what? It really works. So at least Kansas and what other were they? Oh, New Orleans, Louisiana. They get the benefits of that wall too. So I think it was Senator Leahy who used a Sharpie to show the border of the United States. And apparently New Mexico is now part of Mexico, which it actually always has been. The oldest European settlement in the United States, by the way, is in New Mexico. Well, since that's New Mexico, it's the new part of Mexico, and we just cannot have it as a part of the United States, as decreed by the Mad King. Speaking of Mad Kings, he knew about this skiff boating. Yeah, the GOP, led by Crooks Brothers Matt Gaetz stormed the skiff during an impeachment inquiry in a Defense Department official being deposed. And the GOP wants to know what's going on behind that top secret classified door. What could they be hiding? Well, I think it's classified material. That's why it's a skiff. So, the impeachment inquiry was skiff-voted. And Matt Gaetz was the leader of that. Is he going to be disbarred? And then I have another question. These guys brought in cell phones, and one of them, this is how stupid the GOP is, or are they really that stupid? One of them said, today on TV, I had my phone off. It doesn't matter if your phone is off, you stoop. That's why you're not supposed to bring them into a skiff, because they can be tracked even when they're off and can be turned into a radio receiver that can then broadcast. I'm sorry, not a receiver, as a transmitter that can then broadcast to the offices in the FSB right over there in Moscow, and they can hear what's going on. I would expect that a bunch of GOP members who've been compromised by NRA laundered Russian rubles might contend that a phone that's been turned off is no longer a powerful machine. I didn't have it on. All right. For the 64 years, and I got to say it, I heard this probably the day I was born. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. So for the past 64 years, that's what I've heard. Until this guy got elected. So it really hasn't been 64 years, minus the amount of time this guy's been in office. Because apparently for this guy, ignorance of the law is the only excuse, and they're going to let him get away with it. Yeah, he didn't know. Or he's just too incompetent to complete the crime. Once again, for all those many years that I've been walking this luminous earth, is that it doesn't matter if you're incompetent to fulfill the crime. You conspired to do the crime. And if you were incompetent to complete it, it means that you started it. Okay? If you hand the bank teller the note that says, give me the money or else, and then you get scared and walk out the bank, they're still going to arrest you for robbing that bank. Attempting to rob the bank is still a crime. Except for this guy. Because apparently with this attorney general, who I am going to jump the shark here and say he ought to be John Mitchelled, even before he is no longer attorney general. You know, they only tried and convicted John Mitchell when he was no longer AG. So we haven't actually tested that yet. Can standing AG be indicted? I'm sure there's an OLC memo in the Justice Department that prevents that from happening. So we had court cases yesterday in the tax law case over Trump about whether he can go out on Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody. Now, what I always like to do is a little brain teaser, a brain exercise. How about this? How about if Obama wore a tan suit, walked out on Fifth Avenue while he was president, and shot Donald Trump for being a bigot birther? You're telling me there's an OLC memo that says that he could not be investigated, indicted, and tried? You're telling me that there's an OLC memo that would prevent Obama from shooting, or would not prevent, would prevent the incarceration of Obama for shooting Donald Trump on Fifth Avenue for being a bigot birther? Are you sure? They wanted to impeach that guy for not turning over his birth certificate when he did. Yes, there wasn't a call for impeachment. And they started drawing up papers, too. And he had already given his birth certificate, but they didn't accept that one. So a Trump lawyer went into a court and actually argued that Trump could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue, and as long as he's president, because the immunity is not permanent, apparently. How much you want to bet it is? There's a secret OLC memo that says not only can a sitting president named Donald Trump not be convicted of anything while he's president, he won't ever be touched when he's gone too. Because that's like going after your political rivals after the fact. You mean like lock her up? Constitutional crisis? Yeah. We're in a constitutional crisis because a court also ordered the White House to turn over documents, and we'll see if they do. We'll see if they will defy a court order, because then who goes over and gets them? I want to see that. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, of course, at the top, that indicted Giuliani aide who's on the payroll of a high-level Russian mobster, Firtash, who's wanted in the United States, by the way. Well, he claimed executive privilege in court for being a member of Trump's legal team. Yeah, there's no Russians involved in any of this. Funny, isn't it? On the rest of the menu, an appellate court ruled that Trump officials can't just invent religious anti-birth control exemptions out of thin air. You can't just do that. Former acting attorney general and leg-breaking bill collector waterbed salesman Matt Whitaker says abuse of power is not a crime, and he ought to know. And Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg is the winner of the $1 million Berggruen Prize for her pioneering legal work for gender equality. Well deserved. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where a chastened Justin Trudeau reached out to his political opponents after last week's election scare, but ruled out any kind of coalition government. And Spanish authorities will remove fascist dictator Francisco Franco's remains from a state mausoleum today that was purposely placed among thousands of his victims when he died in 1975. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the rightish of the page is our chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the page, at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon site. And do please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. Your generosity over these many years has helped us pay the internet service provider bill that comes monthly. Thank you. Every bit helps, and once again, your generosity has allowed us to continue resisting as the founders originally intended all those many years ago, even before the Constitution was ratified. How did they know? Thank you once again for your generosity. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thank you, Tom. I take care of at Justice Putnam, and you could follow me there. I also post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime and get that linked up on social media. You can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, really wherever podcasts can be found. In fact, on Spreaker, we've added some more platforms that just became available in there. One-button distribution system. Thank you, Spreaker. All righty. Let's see. We might as well just get right on into the offerings at hand here. There's so much more to be said about what is going on in the world right at this very moment. And I'm talking about what's happening in the brain of Donald Trump. But do we really want to dive in that deep? We're only going to get confused. All right. I still don't understand the Colorado thing. Is it really because New Mexico borders on Colorado and because it has the word Mexico in it that triggers him and that must be bad? Could that be an indication of a decline of mental capacity? Or is it just an affirmation of the really organic racism and bigotry that this guy has? Does one really learn bigotry and racism? Or are they born with it? Or is it such a part of the character as a learned trait that even in the deepest, darkest, most morass of mental decline that could occur, what remains? The racist bigotry. That's what they mean by deep-seated. And I don't mean like a seed like a plant. I mean sitting way deep down inside, deep-seated. That's what that means. Alrighty. Well, an appellate court ruled you just can't make up anti-birth control exemptions that are religious out of thin air. I would argue that religion by its very existence has been really invented out of thin air. Literally. Look, Berkeley, Hume, Kant, they all address this issue about what spirit is. Jeez. Lisa Needham brings us this first offering here. And she, of course, is out of Share Blue Media. In a stern rebuke to the Trump administration's position, a divided panel of the Ninth Circuit ruled that the Department of Health and Human Services could not exempt all employers with religious objections from providing birth control. They're not providing birth control. They are not providing birth control. It is a benefit. Some people can take it, some people don't have to. It is a benefit from a third or fourth party. It's not like I work here and my employer's handing out birth control. And you have a religious objection to that, but you still got to hand them out. You'll put it in the holy water bowl. That's not what's happening. Please. Churches have been exempt from the ACA's contraception mandate since 2013, and I don't know why. Under Obama, if a non-religious employer refused to provide birth control, there was an accommodation by which employees could get contraception through their employer's health care, but their employer didn't have to pay for it. Under Trump, HHS sought to expand the exemption in two key ways. First, the exemption would extend to any employer that said they had moral or religious objections to providing birth control. They didn't have to be religiously affiliated. They could simply say they had a sincerely held religious belief, and the rules issued in October of 2017 would exempt them. Next, the rules stated that if employees of an exempted employer wanted to have contraception covered by insurance, they had to get their own insurance policy. Wow. 13 states and the District of Columbia sued over the rules, and in January of this year, a California federal district court enjoined the regulations from taking effect. This last Tuesday, the Ninth Circuit upheld that ruling, which means the rules remain blocked. You know, he loses a lot in court. In fact, I think every time. The appellate court found that the administration's approach to expanding the exemptions had no basis in law. They held that the fact one exemption exists, the carve-out for religious employers, doesn't give the administration the right to issue different or expanded exemptions. The court also looked at the legislative history of the Affordable Care Act. They found that at the time the ACA was passed, The amendment about contraceptive care was intended to require that all health plans cover comprehensive women's preventative care and screenings and cover these recommended services at little or no cost to women. In other words, Congress signaled its intent to cover contraceptive care for all women, and HHS was not allowed to ignore that. In contrast, the court rejected the administration's idea that the ACA's contraception mandate wasn't really a mandate, but was instead a policy. Now, the injunction against the exemptions stays in place while the district court more fully addresses the case at the trial stage. However, if this case makes it up to the Supreme Court, the administration likely will find a more sympathetic ear. That's why the courts have been packed. Josh Israel, also of Share Blue Media, brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Matthew Whitaker, the man Trump appointed as acting Attorney General during Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation into Russian interference, despite never being confirmed by the Senate, offered a stunning defense of his former boss. Abuse of power is not a crime, he argued in a Fox News interview, speaking of the ongoing House impeachment inquiry. What evidence of a crime do you have? He asked host Laura Ingraham. Let's fundamentally boil it down. The Constitution is very clear that this has to be some pretty egregious behavior, and they cannot tell the American people what this case is even about right now because they have to do it in secret. You know, this guy was a leg-breaking bill collector and a waterbed salesman who never read the Constitution of the United States of America. First of all, you don't have to have committed a, quote, crime to be impeached. Please, back to the article. When Trump forced out his first Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, in late 2018, he temporarily selected Whitaker to take over the Justice Department and assume oversight of the special counsel's probe into Russian meddling in the 2016 election. Legal experts noted that his appointment may have been unconstitutional, given that he was never Senate confirmed to any position in the department. House Democrats made clear that the impeachment inquiry is focused on Trump's attempts to pressure Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden. And accepting or soliciting election assistance is a crime, according to the Federal Election Commission and the Justice Department. Additionally, Trump's own chief of staff, Mick the Prick Mulvaney, admitted to reporters in a press conference last week that Trump had withheld military aid to Ukraine in order to secure such an investigation, as well as a probe into a long-debunked conspiracy theory about the DNC servers being in the Ukraine when they're at a museum right next to the file cabinet the Watergate burglars broke into in the Watergate Hotel. Right next to it, with a little placard sign that gives a little history of each and why they are there. Further complicating the matter, Bill Taylor, the current top diplomat for Ukraine, testified before lawmakers and confirmed that such a quid pro quo had indeed existed. In a roughly hour-long opening statement, Taylor said that everything had depended on Ukrainian President Zelensky announcing the investigations publicly, including the military aid. Whitaker's argument that Trump can abuse power with impunity mirrors Trump's own comments when he said he could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody. Trust me, if Obama stood in the middle of Fifth Avenue wearing a tan suit and shot somebody, The guy that choked Eric Garner, yeah, he'd be there. He'd be taking down Obama right now from behind in a chokehold. You know it. And for good measure, Trump's attorney, William S. Consovoy, who has been tasked with shielding Trump's financial documents from being made public, argued in court this week that Trump would, in fact, be immune from criminal investigation if he did shoot someone. Yeah, try this brain teaser again. Obama, tan suit, shooting someone on Fifth Avenue in New York. Really? There's an OLC memo that says he can do that. Are you sure? Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy comes out of the Associated Press. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg is the winner of this year's $1 million Berggruen Prize for Philosophy and Culture. The award, announced by the Los Angeles-based Berggruen Institute, honors Ginsburg for her pioneering legal work for gender equality and her support for the rule of law. The Institute says Ginsburg will direct the money to charity. The 86-year-old Ginsburg has been on the Supreme Court since 1993. She is the oldest justice but maintains an active public speaking schedule that took her to San Francisco earlier this week. And, of course, Ginsburg has been treated twice for cancer in the past 10 months. Before joining the High Court, she served 13 years as a federal appeals court judge in D.C. Ginsburg spent the early part of her career as a professor at Rutgers Law School in New Jersey and the Columbia University Law School. She started the ACLU's Women's Rights Project in the 70s. The Berggruen Prize was established in 2016 by philanthropist Nicholas Berggruen to honor those who have, quote, profoundly shaped human self-understanding and advancement, end quote. Berggruen said in an interview that Ginsburg played a leading role in gender equality. She has done a lot to protect and further civil liberties. She has done a lot for women. That's especially important in these times, he said. Ginsburg will receive the award on December 16th at a ceremony at the New York Public Library. When she received a different foundation's $100,000 award in 1996, Ginsburg directed the money to more than a dozen schools, performing arts groups, and civil rights organizations, according to her financial disclosure report. Dumadani will never show his. Isn't that odd? All right, let's get to our break. And, a rightfully deserved award for Ruth Bader Ginsburg, by the way. Let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we are going to go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. We will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. Deep in the Amazon lives one of the world's largest freshwater fish, the legendary arapaima. It tips the scales at hundreds of pounds, making it a coveted catch for extreme anglers, like Jeremy Wade from the show River Monsters.
That's a fish. That's a good fish.
After a dramatically scored struggle, he catches one, and it takes two guys to hold it up.
There it is. Look at that for a fish. Look at that. Massive female arapaima, about 150 pounds.
Speaking of scales, this giant fish has another superlative quality.
It has these very impressive armor scales on its body, which prevent penetration by predators' teeth, yet it still makes the fish quite flexible and nimble in the water.
Robert Ritchie, a materials scientist at UC Berkeley. The predators he's talking about are piranhas, but the mighty arapaima has them beat with its scales, one of the toughest flexible biological materials, according to Ritchie's team. After subjecting the scales to stress tests and electron microscopy in the lab, they figured out the scales' secrets. For one, they have a hard, mineralized layer on the outside.
You need the hard layer at the surface to prevent the thing from penetrating. But if the whole scale was made of this hard layer, it would just shatter, like if you tried to penetrate a piece of glass.
And so the scale then has a layer of softer but tougher collagen on the inside, more resistant to cracking in a piranha's bite. Materials scientists have already figured out this trick, to build materials with a hard layer on the outside and a tough layer on the inside, but the secret of the arapaima scales is how exquisitely they transition from the hard to the tough.
We would love to do that in synthetic materials. It's just very difficult to make materials like that. Maybe 3D printing in the future can do this, but nature does this rather cleverly because it builds its materials from the bottom up, from the atoms and molecules up to the macro scale.
Photos and details are in the journal Matter. So who cares about a fish's scales? Well, the Air Force Office of Scientific Research does. They funded the study because Kevlar and other body armors are incredibly heavy, and the scales of this piranha-proof fish could be the key to a lighter load. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
I'm probably okay to have one more drink before I drive home. I'm probably okay. I open the window to stay alert. Probably okay. I just popped some gum in my mouth.
Step out of the car, please.
I probably made a mistake.
Probably okay isn't okay when it comes to drinking and driving. If you see a warning sign, stop and call a cab, a car, or a friend. Buzzed driving is drunk driving. A message brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
In 2012 in the United States, about 317,000 motor vehicle crashes involved a large truck. 26,000 truck drivers and their passengers were injured in these crashes, and about 700 died. Trucker safety requires an alert, buckled-up, experienced driver with a reliable vehicle and a strong employer safety program. Seatbelts are the most effective way to prevent an injury or death in a motor vehicle crash, but in 2013, 1 in 6 drivers of large trucks didn't use their seatbelts. Employers can help truck drivers stay safe by committing to driver safety programs at the highest level of leadership, establishing and enforcing driver safety policies, including requiring everyone in the truck to buckle up, and addressing factors that contribute to crashes, such as drowsy and distracted driving. To learn more, visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution, and you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
Can gangs run prisons? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. Let's consider private prison companies, the three largest being CoreCivic, Geo Group, and the Management and Training Corporation, MTC for short. MTC's Wilkinson County, Mississippi facility, a maximum security prison, was the subject of an October 2019 expose in Prison Legal News. The article says that 80% of the 900 prisoners in this Mississippi Max, run by MTC, are gang-affiliated. 80%! And that weapons assaults and stabbings are all too common. Part of the reason? The prison has been paying guards, remember this is a for-profit corporation, just over the federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour, and not surprisingly, the annual staff turnover rate has been close to 90%, with as many as one-third of the 241 positions vacant. The company, MTC, says it's inaccurate to say that gangs have run the prison, but a recent independent audit, quote, noted that gang leaders decided which prisoners got jobs and perks, and further found that the warden speaks with gang lords' leaders and asks them to control their men. It ain't right, but it's the truth, the report quotes the now former warden as having said. The company insists it's making improvements. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU, because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1934. That was the day that the first minimum wage law went into effect in the United States. The first minimum wage was 25 cents an hour. The wage law was part of the Fair Labor Standards Act passed earlier that year. The act also included a mandate for a 40-hour work week and restrictions against child labor. Raising the minimum wage is one of the great political battles being fought by labor today. Since 1968, the minimum wage has not kept up with inflation. It has lost one-third of its value. Not coincidentally, the top 1% of the wealthiest people in the United States have seen their share of the nation's economy double from 11% in 1968 to 22% in 2012. In January of 2014, 600 leading economists, including 7 Nobel Peace Prize winners, wrote an open letter to Congress and the President. They urged for the passage of an increase in the minimum wage. The letter explained, in recent years, there have been important developments in the academic literature on the effect of increases in the minimum wage on employment. With the weight of evidence now showing that increases in the minimum wage have little or no effect on the employment of minimum wage workers, even during times of weakness in the labor market, research suggests that a minimum wage increase could have a small stimulative effect on the economy as low-wage workers spend their additional earnings, raising demand and job growth, and providing some help on the jobs front. The 1938 minimum wage law was passed at the height of the Great Depression. Labor was on the march for economic justice and fair working conditions. What will it take today to get our elected officials to raise the wage? Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
A group of about 24 Republican lawmakers, led by Representative Matt Gaetz of Florida and including House Minority Whip Steve Scalise, barged into a closed-door impeachment inquiry hearing on Wednesday. Several brought cell phones, which are prohibited in the secure area, or SCIF. Deputy Assistant Defense Secretary Laura Cooper was on Capitol Hill to testify. She reportedly left the deposition room while the more than 20 conservative lawmakers refused to leave for 5 hours. The House parliamentarian has reportedly ruled the lawmakers violated the House's deposition rules. And House Homeland Security Committee Chairman Benny Thompson of Mississippi sent a letter to the Congressional Sergeant-at-Arms, Paul Irving, asking him to take action against the gang of Republicans who invaded the SCIF. He wrote, "This unprecedented breach of security raises serious concerns for committee chairmen, including me, responsible for maintaining SCIFs. As such, I'm requesting you to take action with respect to the members involved in the breach. More broadly, I urge you to take House-wide action to remind all members about the dangers of such reckless action and the potential national security risks of such behavior." I want to know, where are the handcuffs? Donald Trump announced in a speech Wednesday that he would lift all sanctions on Turkey after, he claims, the country's leaders told him that their ceasefire in northern Syria would be permanent. Vice President Mike Pence announced the initial 5-day ceasefire last week after meeting with Turkish President Erdogan. Russia then brokered an extension and agreed to take control of the area jointly with Turkey. Turkey launched its incursion into areas held by U.S. allied Kurdish militias after Trump cleared the way by moving out U.S. forces who had fought alongside the Kurds against ISIS. Trump's decision drew sharp bipartisan criticism, some of which was muted after Trump imposed sanctions on Turkey. Trump claimed the news of the ceasefire extension showed his Syria policy was a, quote, big success. And he bragged that not one drop of American blood was spilled. Well, not so fast. NBC's chief foreign correspondent, Richard Engel, whose word about what's happening in Syria I trust a whole lot more than Trump's, begs to differ.
Well, of course, not a drop of blood was shed by the Americans because they were told to go back to their bases and watch it all happen. They were witnessing a crime against humanity. Ethnic cleansing is a crime against humanity. And by witnessing it, by being in a position to stop it, but being ordered not to stop it, they could open themselves up to accusations that they were even aiding and abetting. So the U.S. had a mission here that was working. This was a very specific mission that was to fight against ISIS with a very small number of elite U.S. Special Operations Forces. They were working. They had captured and killed tens of thousands of ISIS fighters. And then abruptly, for reasons that maybe we'll know one day, President Trump has this call with Erdogan and he decides to let Turkey invade and blow up the entire project. And now those special operations forces are being pulled out. President Trump says, some are going to stay behind and protect the oil, so we get the oil. I don't think he has any idea of what these special operations forces do. They don't go around with buckets and pick up oil and fly them in helicopters back to the United States. They hunt down ISIS fighters.
During an appeals court hearing about a subpoena of Trump's tax records on Wednesday, the subject turned to that Department of Justice memo that states that a sitting president can't be indicted. Trump's attorney, William Consovoy, actually said that a president can't be investigated or charged with a crime until after he leaves the White House. Judge Denny Chin asked whether that meant a president wouldn't even face justice for shooting somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue. Listen for yourself.
It has to. And what's your view on the Fifth Avenue example? The local authorities couldn't investigate? They couldn't do anything about it?
I think once a president is removed from office, any local authority. This is not a permanent immunity.
Well, I'm talking about while in office.
No.
That's the hypo. Nothing could be done. That's your position.
That is correct. That is correct.
Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook's CEO, was in Washington, D.C. to testify before the House Financial Services Committee on Wednesday about his company's cryptocurrency initiative called Libra. It didn't go very well. Zuckerberg began his testimony by admitting that when he came to Congress to talk about Russian interference in the 2016 election, he was defensive. But then he proceeded to be defensive for the rest of the time, too. Legislators asked Zuckerberg straightforward questions that he struggled to answer. When lawmakers asked Zuckerberg about Facebook's policy of allowing politicians to lie in ads, he had no answers. An intense exchange with Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was quite telling.
Would I be able to run advertisements on Facebook targeting Republicans in primaries saying that they voted for the Green New Deal? I mean, if you're not fact-checking political advertisements, I'm just trying to understand the bounds here. What's fair game?
I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. I think
so. You don't know if I'll be able to do that.
I think probably.
Do you see a potential problem here with a complete lack of fact-checking on political advertisements?
Well, Congresswoman, I think lying is bad, and I think if you were to run an ad that had a lie, that would be bad. That's different from it being, for in our position, the right thing to do to prevent your constituents or people in an election from seeing that you had lied.
So you won't take down lies, or you will take down lies? I think it's just a pretty simple yes or no.
Congresswoman,
I'm not talking about spin. I'm talking about actual
Yes, in most cases, in a democracy, I believe that people should be able to see for themselves what politicians that they may or may not vote for
So
are
you
saying,
won't take
judge
them
their
down.
character for themselves.
So you won't you may flag that it's wrong, but you won't take it down.
Congresswoman, it depends on the context that it shows up.
And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, so I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com. Please click on the donate button.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 42 degrees Fahrenheit. Brr. We are slated for a high of about 76 to 78 today. Oh my. Overnight lows tonight, fortunately, will be in the low 50s. Not as cold, thankfully. Winds have remained light and variable for quite a few days and will remain so in the foreseeable future. Sunny conditions will prevail, though at the very moment we have a bit of fog hanging about. Clear skies overnight and sunny tomorrow. Once again, with a high of about 76 to 78, so very much the same. Ragweed pollen is registered at low. The air quality index has come down a couple of notches to 28 parts per million. And that daytime UV index remains in the moderate range at 3. Barometric pressure is holding steady, as it is almost every morning now, at 30.28 inches. Visibility is at 7 miles, and relative humidity is at 75%. Seems a little more than that, but where I'm at, but where this weather station is, he's registering 74%. Okay, weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 53 degrees with rain. Paris is 62 and cloudy. Rome is 75 and fair. Kiev is 53 with fog. Kabul is 57 and fair. Hong Kong is 75 and clear. Tokyo is 60 degrees with a rain shower because they have typhoons in the area, and a weather report stating as such. Sydney, Australia is 67 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 68 and sunny. And New York is 60 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny on the Big Apple. That is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. Steve Scherer and Kelsey Johnson of Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A chastened Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, whose grip on power was weakened after an election this week, said he would reach out to his opponents, but ruled out any kind of coalition government. The ruling Liberals lost their parliamentary majority on Monday's vote and must now rely on other parties to govern. A top Trudeau ally lost his seat, and the Liberals were wiped out in 2 western provinces, putting more strain on national unity. Canadians gave me a lot to think about on Monday night. I'm going to take the time necessary to really reflect on how best to serve Canadians, Trudeau told a news conference. His tone was notably more muted than it had been on Monday, when he triumphantly told supporters he had been given a new mandate to pursue priorities such as climate change. Liberal officials say Trudeau will seek support in Parliament on a case-by-case basis, most likely from the left-leaning Democrats, and should easily survive for 2 more years.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Clara Leah Laudette and Ashifa Kasem of Reuters bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Cries of long live Franco accompanied the coffin of Francisco Franco today as Spain removed the remains of its former dictator from the state mausoleum where he was buried in 1975. His exhumation and reburial is the most significant move in years by Spanish authorities to lay the ghost of the general, whose legacy still divides the country he dominated for nearly 4 decades. The ruling Socialist Party, which faces a national election next month, has long sought to remove Franco's remains from the huge monument built on his orders and containing the remains of combatants from both sides of the 1936-1939 Civil War, as crowds of media and onlookers gathered outside. Franco's coffin was extracted from its tomb in the Valley of the Fallen, in a ceremony witnessed only by relatives and a small group of officials. The coffin was carried to a waiting hearse, and then transferred to a helicopter for the short flight to a private family vault north of Madrid, where Franco will be reburied next to his wife. Members of family had sought a court order to try to prevent the exhumation. Around 500,000 people were killed in the war between Franco's nationalist rebels, backed by Hitler and Mussolini, and left-wing Republicans. Franco then ruled Spain as an autocrat until his death. The exhumation is intensely symbolic for Spain, said political scientist Pablo Simon, because the Franco monument has always been connected to those who miss the old regime. So good riddance, Franco. Good riddance. You can go home to your family now. Spend more time with them. All right, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know that Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on. In fact, we are going to meet up tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, en mon Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.